Hello, welcome back to the Bio 122 lecture videos. This is video 29 on nitrogen waste, coming from chapter 41 of the osmotic regulation and excretion chapter in your textbook. So when we talk about nitrogen waste, this is the waste product of metabolism. When cells are doing metabolism, the primary thing that they're producing is, of course, carbon dioxide, but that's the job of the respiratory system to remove. The other major waste is nitrogen waste, because this is the product of the breakdown of proteins and nucleic acids. And the problem with nitrogen is when it is dissolved in the water, it has a natural tendency to be converted into ammonia. That's the natural product of it. But ammonia is highly toxic to animal cells, and therefore it must be removed rapidly. Now, the way in which the nitrogen waste is removed is in some animals, they simply remove ammonia directly. But other animals convert it to other molecules. So they convert the ammonia into either urea or uric acid. And each of these differ in their toxicity and also the amount of energy it costs to produce that molecule. So if we look at groupings of different animals. First of all, where do the nitrogen waste come from? It comes from protein and amino acids. And on the left side of this chart, we see that some animals, which is the fish and aquatic animals, they don't do anything other than just allow the nitrogen waste to form ammonia. And then they remove ammonia directly from the body. The reason they can do that is that ammonia requires an enormous amount of water to remove it, to efficiently get it out of the body. But of course, fish are living in water, so they have an unlimited supply of water. And it requires very little energy to do so. On the other extreme is animals that produce uric acid. And if we look at the molecule of uric acid and compare that to the molecule of ammonia, you can see it's a much more complicated molecule. It's got nitrogen in it, but it now is an organic molecule that has a carbon ring, in fact, a double carbon ring with multiple bonds. So this requires several enzymes in order to convert ammonia into this form of uric acid, which also requires an input of energy in the form of ATP. So this requires the most energy, but it requires the least amount of water. And then in the middle, you have the amphibians, many sharks, and then all the mammals. An intermediate stage between ammonia and uric acid is urea. And if we look at this molecule, we can see it's certainly more complicated than ammonia is, but it's much less complicated than uric acid is. So while it does require some energy to produce it, it doesn't require as much energy as uric acid would to produce. So it's right in the middle as far as energy cost, and it's also right in the middle as the amount of water that's needed to remove it from the body. So let's look at each of these in a little bit more detail, starting with the fish, because animals that live in water generally don't do anything with the nitrogen waste other than just secrete it in the form of ammonia. Why? Because ammonia requires a large amount of water to remove it, because it also is extremely toxic, and so it can never be allowed to build up in the body. So it has to be a constant flushing of ammonia out of the body. But for fish, they just simply secrete it through their entire body surface, so through the scales and through the gills, and because they're continuously in water, so it's no difficulty whatsoever. And there's a huge benefit to doing it this way for them because they don't require any energy to convert this. It's just removed passively. But that works fine if you're living in water. If you're going to be living in land, you have to come up with some other strategies because there's not going to be enough water available to effectively deal with ammonia. So the intermediate level is urea, which is what's found in mammals, including us, of course, adult amphibians, and many marine species. So many fish and marine species will do ammonia, but they can also, a few of them will also do urea. And it's an intermediate thing. The liver is what does the conversion of ammonia to urea, and urea is much less toxic. It's still toxic, but it can actually build up in the body for quite a while before it really leads to problems. So it doesn't have to be removed continuously in the way that ammonia does. And the kidneys have the job of removing it from the body. The downside to urea is that it does require some energy to create it because it is a more complicated molecule than ammonia is. So it does require a little bit of ATP, but the benefit of it, the upside, is that it doesn't require as much water to remove. It still requires water. So you're still going to be wasting some water to remove it, but not as much as if it was ammonia. The final category is uric acid, which is what's found in insects, snails, or the land snails, birds, and many reptiles. Produce the most complicated molecule of the three, which is uric acid. So that's the downside. It requires a lot of energy to produce it. But the upside is it's extremely non-toxic. So it can be allowed to build up in the body for quite a while and all removed at the same time. And the removal of it really does not require water. In fact, it doesn't readily dissolve in water. So this is the big upside, is that you don't have to be using water just for the purpose of removing nitrogen waste. So let's look at what animals would use uric acid. So yes, downside, a lot of energy expenditure, but the upside is for birds and insects that are flying, you don't want to be carrying extra water weight because the extra water itself would require more energy in order to fly. So that's the trade-off based on the environment that these different animals live in. So that's the end of this section. Okay, so I'll see you on the next video.